So, like for example, if you get something like this, you could get like a confirm like that, and a lot of damage from there, right? So, I think stuff like that also is why I like it so much. And it also looks cool.
What is up, y'all? KRC Pinto here. Welcome back to Secret Sauce. Today, got a very special guest. We got Kizzie Kay. Kizzie, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. How's it going with you, man?
Dude, I'm doing great. Stoked to have you on. I love watching your content, dude. It's an honor to have you on the show today. And stoked to talk to you about Ky Kiske here, your boy.
Yeah, bro. The king of Ilya, huh?
The king himself. You know, your boy, he just got some buffs. He was a little down in the dumps on the tier list the past, month or so, but things kind of looking up right now, yeah?
Yeah, dude. And I'm really excited for what Arxis is going to offer with the direction for this character in October, because the direction that they did for him in September is really promising, and it's showing they are slowly but surely completing this character, and I'm very, very excited to what they're going to have in store for him.
I mean, they definitely got to want him to be good. He's got to get the sole bad guy treatment, right? He's the other pro tag. He needs the love.
Man, I mean, as you see the story, man, he definitely needs some love, man. He did his part,
He did his part. All right, man. Well, I got some questions about the character for you. You ready to jump into it?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So first up, just to get people introduced to the character if they've never played the game before, what's the elevator pitch for playing Ky Kiske? What's his game plan about in a sentence?
Oh, I mean, I feel like there's a couple of ways you could play him. I feel like you could play him kind of like the, rush down like aggressive style and things like that, and go for big reads and kind of go for the high risk, high reward. And then you have the other play style where it's a little bit more of the control type of taming your opponent type of archetype. Where it's really one of those things that is really hard to do with that. It's you have to kind of know a lot of information for not only your character in the situation, but what your opponent can do also. And I really feel that are the two biggest archetypes you could kind of play this character in this game particularly.
So he's kind of like what you need him to be, depending on how you're playing, basically. He sounds pretty versatile.
Yeah, he's pretty versatile now, especially with the direction that he's going. And the best part about it too is he's one of those characters where the more resources you have, the more opportunities you can do in a lot of scenarios.
Do you have a preferred play style for when you're in a match? Do you run them a certain way? I know you kind of alternate back and forth between the two styles depending on the situation, but which one do you enjoy more?
I control more of the control style, and the reason why is because I actually really, really like the idea of understanding what is happening rather than gambling of what's happening, right? One of the things that I personally feel that is just very, very strong just to have as a player in any sports or anything you want to be good at is understanding the situation that you're in, right? And having all of the possibilities that you can do and what you cannot do, and playing that type of game of chess with your opponent, because that's what makes the opponent, if you play certain players, that's what makes them feel uncomfortable of what you're going to do, right? Which means that because they're not sure what you're going to do, they're going to be doing multiple variations of offense or multiple variation of options, right? And decision making. So being that type of archetype, it really makes me tell of what kind of player that I'm playing against, and I can really get a strong information just with that type of interaction alone.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of control the situation instead of relying on the spider sense.
Yeah, I mean, spider sense is always very important, right?
Right.
And I think having a spider sense is super good, but you can't always use it, right?
Right. Okay. All right, here's a low ball for you. What is your favorite move of Ky's and why?
I personally really like the slash, the dire clot. I really like this move a lot. The reason why I really like it a lot too is because it's one of the few moves that you could kind of put the opponent kind of in the mid range right here, and also it uses a unique mechanic that Ky has, which is the shock state. So not only did I push my opponent back and put him in the mid range, but if it hits, I feel like a lot of opportunities happen that is also really good, especially in the corner. You get to do like a lot of damage. So like for example, if you get something like this, you know, you could get like a confirm like that and a lot of damage from there, right? So I think stuff like that also is why I like it so much. And it also looks cool.
Was that 2 hits in super for over 50% right there? That's wild. Damn, that's a lot of damage.
Yeah, it is a lot of damage.
All right, makes sense. Yeah, that'd be my favorite too if I was putting out damage like that.
Right. It's I would say it's one of his best starters in my opinion.
Yeah, it looks like it. Damn.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about your game plan a little bit. So, Strive relatively new. There's a lot to figure out still, but Ky, you know, it's pretty clear off rip that he is a neutral dominant character. He's got long buttons, he's got a projectile, he's got multiple ways to approach. How do you play neutral with this character? What's your strategy for closing the gap?
The way I kind of close the gap, and this is just something that I use just with the fundamentals that I developed and worked really hard for and things like that, and put a lot of time, is basically kind of like looking at what my opponent is doing and kind of like getting kind of like a lot of information on what their objective is, right? Like, are they trying to play the matchup? If they're trying to just do what they want to do, are they trying to like adapt to how I'm trying to adapt? To like, what is their first chess move? What is their first chess piece that they're going to show to me, right? Now, if they're out there already showing me like they're going to move their queen as soon as possible, then I need to understand that, okay, I need to like contain this type of like, order that they're trying to like establish, right? And my goal in the mid range is to basically kind of like counter that, right? It's like have all of the answers ready before the answers come out, basically, or have the counters ready for all the answers that they have in mind towards me.
Okay, so it's not reactive necessarily so much as like predictive.
So it's not necessarily like predicting, right? It's kind of like knowing, right? So like for example, if I have Zato in the corner, right? How is Zato going to get out? They have two ways to get out. They have jump, and they have oppose, right? So once you see that they use oppose, and it worked, as the opponent, you're going to be like, well, oppose worked. Why won't I do it again, right? That's the smartest thing that you would think, right? Like, let me ask you this, for example, like if you snuck in to grab a cookie from the cookie jar at 2 a.m., what makes you think if you wanted a cookie at 2 a.m. again that it wouldn't work?
Right.
Now, me knowing that you did that, what makes you think that I'm going to allow you to do that again? So it's not at that point it's predicting. It's already know that that's what's going to happen. But you got to get the information first. So you get the information first. And then after you get that information, then you kind of like variable of like, okay, this is what this person likes to do. Okay, when this person is in panic mode, this is what this person likes to do. What is the easiest way this person wants to get out of a situation? So it's one of those type of things that you slowly just start breaking down your opponent's game plan while you're also playing the matchup of what the character is, right? Sometimes you got to sit here, depending on the character. Sometimes you got to sit a little bit closer. It all varies. But when you're sitting in all these ranges, you always want to keep in mind what your opponent is doing and also what the matchup, where you need to be in the matchup.
Does Ky have any specific tools that you favor that cover like a lot of options? Like, what are your favorite things to do? Like, say this exact scenario, Zato in the corner. What's like the moves you're going to use to shut this guy down?
Well, I know that Zato wants to, try to, do something like this, right? Or let's give you an example. Most Zato players, they would like to do this. Like, or let me do this. Like with the pressure like that, right? So most Zatos, they're trying to get that, and, try to retreat from there, right? So for my scenario, because I know that they probably want to do that, I will go for, like, if I have resources, I will go for something like this, right? Because I know that in this situation, they're going to try to, like, sandwich me, right? So they can get out of the situation. So Stun Dipper is a very, very good, useful tool of shutting that all down, especially with resources, because with resources, it's kind of like an insurance policy, right? Or not in policy, just an insurance, like insurance card, basically, right? It's like, if you have this meter even though you may be wrong, even if you're wrong, it's still okay. Like you still have something to work with. So even if you block this, I get pressure. So isn't it the end of the world? No, it's not. But if I hit you, then I just get quality of life, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. How often are you using Ky's projectiles in neutral? I feel like this is something people talk about a lot, is whether or not his projectiles are good in neutral. Especially like charged stun edge. You know, some people don't want to commit to the charge up. Some people think it takes up a lot of space. What's your thought on that?
So I think fireballs generally in this game are not to be really strong, and I think they made it that way because they knew that if people would have a strong projectile game, it will scare a lot of people away. So I think in general they just naturally started weakening fireballs. But I would say that Kai's fireball is actually one of the weakest in the game, unfortunately. But they do have some important usage, which is very important to keep in mind. Even though a tool may not be the strongest, you still have to use it in a grand scheme of things just to keep the option there. Because when you have a projectile, it makes players play a certain type of way, regardless if the projectile is good or not, right? It makes opponents play a different way. Because if I stay right here, I could throw a fireball right here. So in your mind, you're going to think I'm going to throw a fireball, right? So you're always going to have that in your mind because I can throw a fireball here. I could. But you want to have that mindset as like, I could, but I'm not. Or if you think I'm not going to throw a projectile because you're running at me, then that stops that, right? So it's one of those type of things. It's like it has certain purposes, right? And one of the most important purposes is shock state, right? Unfortunately, stun edge shock state doesn't last as long. So you kind of want to use like S stun edge of something that's like, all right, I got the stun edge real quick. Did it hit? It didn't. Okay. Obviously, he's going to try to approach. I got to be careful. So, you want to kind of use this as a setup, right? So this is kind of like your setup point right here. So like, oh, the stun edge, he was waiting for me. I go for the flip kick. I'm plus on block, right? So like, do flip kick, plus on block. And now like you kind of like have pressure. Or like, I just stun edge here. I think he's going to run up afterwards. Stun dipper, right? Something like that. So like, counterattack. Or you just, stun edge, frame trap, and you take that 35 damage and you kind of just like, keep the opponent like in check. Like, oh, I could throw it. And then look for like jump ins or like run up where like your buttons or like, air throw or like air to air, all depends on the situation, right?
I like it. It sounds like your neutral is a very surgical approach. Like very like one piece at a time.
Yeah. It's definitely I think honestly like it's one of my biggest strengths in terms of just learning fighting games because that's one of the things that I really try to study the most. So it's kind of like my whole structure around that, and I want to say it's honestly one of my biggest strengths. It's one of them, and it's that. So I'm very I very much enjoy of just talking about it in general.
Word.
And it still feels like I'm learning too. So that's another good thing why I like it so much.
This is tangential. Does it bug you that the screen is so small in this game since that like creates less like neutral space between players?
Yes, it does actually. It actually does bug me a lot. But it's one of those things where like in a new game you just have to kind of accept the way things are, and that's fine. Like it's fine. I still feel like there is some places where you can play really clean neutral and whatnot. It's just a little bit more or less. It's more or less oriented than long, and that's fine, right? Like that means that games like this just doesn't prioritize like my biggest strength. That just means that I just have to use it differently, and that takes time, right? Adjusting to like a different like nature or like environment and whatnot, it takes time. But I still think that I can make it work, right? I can make it work. So I'm not really worried about if a game just want to take it away. I'll try to find a way to like make it work. It just takes time.
Gotcha. All right, let's talk about an area where this game does shine, which is pressure. This game, you know, your pressure sequences matter a lot. Ky with shock state involved, his pressure sequences can be particularly brutal. What do you like to do when you get them blocking? How are you making people sweat?
So, well, you know, Ky doesn't really have a lot of frame advantage pressure, so you really have to. I think as a player, if you're gonna try to take him to the next level, and you know, want to try to be extremely consistent, I really feel like you have to really think about how your opponent's trying to like block, right? So, like one of the things that I try to do when fighting, when using this character, is I used kind of go for block streams that see if they're trying to stand up, see if they're trying to jump. Do they like to jump out of my pressure? Do they like to mash out of my pressure? Like I have a lot of like block streams that kind of like cover like kind of like two of the options. So you see how like if I do this really fast, nothing comes out, you know, like that, right? But then if I delay it, right, you get a counter hit, right? So it's kind of just seeing like how the opponent likes to defend. And if I know that they're not going to press anything, now that allows me to do like run up pressure, right? So like allows me to do like stuff like run up pressure because now you're not pressing anything. So now I kind of got an idea. So now you start doing stuff like this, right? Because now you could kind of like micro dash because now you condition them to not to really like approach, right? So that's kind of like the idea you want to. That's kind of like the idea that I use with this character. You know, sometimes I use 5K because 5K is also really good to do that, right? Because it doesn't really push you as far. So that's also really good. So you can also add like throw into this too. So it's a lot of like variable like timings that you just kind of like you want to change to kind of see what your opponent wants to do, and just keep an eye on what they're doing. Right? It's like if they're backdashing, you want to kind of do block streams that also calls out backdash, right? You see something like this, for example. So you see something like, you see how that caught the backdash now, right?
Yeah.
It's just seeing like the timing. But if you do something like this, you see how they back out, right? Or you do something like this, you see how they backdash now. But now this calls it out. So it's all about just changing like the timing and like what you're trying to look for and how the opponent is trying to get out.
Gotcha. You're going fishing, trying to
Yes.
figure out what they're doing.
Yes. That's kind of like what you have to do because he don't have a lot of frame advantage moves, right? Like he has this move right here and that's it. So, but the thing is, if you do this, you don't really get a lot out of it, you know? So it's not like you can really do much, right? Or even if you try to do something like that, right? Let's say, for example, like they're pressing the button, didn't this loses, this loses, that loses, that loses, that loses, right? And you have things like this too, where like you could call it out with like that too. You know, like you could try. You know, you can kind of do frame traps with catching like mash and stuff like that. So he has like a lot of frame traps to like stop that too. You know, it just matters of where and how you want to do it, right? Because now you can do something like this. You know, oh, you caught mashing. I got meter here, vapor thrust, and then like, you know, party time, right? And then look, you just got, you know, mad damage, 305 damage just for that. So it all depends on what you want to do.
So no plus frames on his base stuff, but he can generate good frames when they're in shock, correct?
The only time he can is when this, and that's basically it, actually. Everything else becomes the same, right? It's like this becomes safe, not plus, but this, you know, you have a frame advantage move there. But the thing is about this move too, it's like this is a very like, you know, risky move to do. So you have to be careful because you know, you get jab out, you know, like that, you know, stuff like this, and you know that just makes things harder because if they know you're gonna do it, then you know they could do that into RC and then stop the momentum and stuff like that.
Does shock state affect the chip damage too? Is that the other thing it does?
Shock. definitely makes you do more chip damage. Yes.
So does that factor into your game plan on pressure at all? Like, are you trying to like get them shocked so you can just chip them into oblivion?
Yes, actually. So sometimes I actually try to chip my opponent away. And I'll do a lot of stuff like this too. So I'll do something like this. Let me go here. So I'll go something like this. Right? So I'll do something like, and I just did a good amount of chip. I honestly think I did a great amount of chip from right there, right? Because now I'm like, okay, I got him shock state and go for that, right? And then it kind of resets itself too. And that does like good amount of chip, right? That's also really good. I use a lot of like strings to like kind of peel away the opponent with my projectiles and specials.
Okay. So to boil this down, we're using strings that cover like 2 or so options and seeing if they use a different option so that you can then punish that option later on.
Yes.
We're using the shock state to do chip when they're willing to hold it so you can get it applied without risk.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And other than that, we're fishing for frame traps that lead to Ky's crazy damage towards the corner. That sound right?
Yeah.
Okay. He's such an all-rounder, like, to his core, because that's so many different pressure plans built into one.
Yeah, and you know, sometimes I feel like even with all of these like pressure plans, I feel like it's very hard to utilize all of it and not tunnel vision one option sometimes because you have so many options, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Like being able to appropriately juggle when you're doing what to keep them on their toes definitely gets a little trickier when you have a lot of routes to follow.
Exactly.
Let's talk about Ky's Oki. So, historically, Ky likes to charge stun edge for Oki in older Guilty games. Is that still the truth in Guilty Gear Strive?
Yeah, it very depends, but the reason why I kind of like charge stun edge is because Ky don't do a lot of damage, so you get free chip, and it also forces them to FD. So that's a lot of reasons why I like using it. And it also keeps the opponent like honest, right? Because it's like, okay, obviously he's plus on block because I don't have a lot of frame advantage moves. So it forces the opponent not to really like attack. So that means you can kind of go for like a loop, right? Kind of put your opponent in the loop. You know, depending on what situation in. So charge stun also just do a lot. Because look, off 2 throws, look how much damage you get. So right here. Off 2 throws, right? There's already good damage right there.
My boy Zato's half dead. He's bleeding out here.
Exactly. So to be able to like kind of loop this is super good.
So is that generally like the Oki game plan? Do you have any devious stuff you do to people off a knockdown?
It depends on like what kind of opponent am I playing, right? So like against like certain opponents, like it varies, right? So like some characters have like great reversals on wake up, so you kind of don't want to have to do it. So you want to kind of use like safe jumps, right? So I kind of use like safe jumps, mix that up, you know, stuff like that. And then I go for like a tick throw, you know, go for like a tick throw like this. You know, or like a safe jump, depends. All depends, right? So I like mix it up a lot, but one of the general game plans is definitely this, is because you get a lot of data on like the opponent.
You got any other Oki tips for Ky?
One of the Oki tips too is like I know a lot of people ask me of like why I kind of like whiff jab and stuff like this, and that's just the kind of like frame kill. It's a really good frame kill. It's a really good frame kill for me, especially. So you can kind of like basically kind of like get like nicer frame advantage, basically. And you're able to do a little bit more than normal, even without shock state, right? Sometimes you're not gonna always be able to get them shock state, and some characters you can't even actually charge stunish them Oki because they can kind of like go under it. You see how the difference right there? How this is regular right here. You see how it like trades, right? But then if I do this, hold up. So I go to do this, right? You see how it hits later? Obviously, I messed up the time, but it hits later now. Hold up. There you go. It hits later, so now because the flip kick hits later, that means it has more advantage on block, and I don't need shock state, so that's the most important thing because not every time you're gonna have shock state, right?
Right. That is interesting. Does that only work from mid screen? Like, can you set that same thing up in the corner, or is it too close?
Yep. You set up in the corner.
Nice. That's sick. Good to know.
Yep.
Nice little tip there.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
So I use that jab to frame kill, and then I go for the micro dash flip kick.
Oh, you got a dash in there too?
Yeah, so like I don't know if a lot of people don't know, but like regular flip, right? You got like the regular flip, right? Or like we'll go this, right? So 1, 2. You see the difference right there?
Yeah. Is it just installing the momentum on it?
Yep. Exactly.
Is there a reason you do dash inputs instead of the macro?
Because I play multiple fighting games, I don't want to have the habit of relying on it for me personally. So I feel like the only time I really use the dash macro sometimes, honestly, is the backdash.
Gotcha.
Because I feel like that's like the kind of like generic way for me to use it without thinking that I always have to do it. But I try to mix it up both, you know.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I use a lot like that. But I use backdash kind of like for defense or like reversal backdash, right? But usually I'm kind of using my inputs.
Gotcha. Well, speaking of defensive backdashes, let's talk about what happens when Ky has to block. So your boy is blessed with a DP, although if I'm not mistaken, it's not the best DP in the game, right?
Hmm.
So
It's not. I think it's actually the worst Dragon Punch in the game.
You think it's the worst one? Why is that?
Yeah, I think so. I think the one is too slow. It's too slow, and then on top of that too, his other DP is also it's slow also, but it doesn't cover a lot of space in front of him. So I feel like people could just kind of like sit right there. You see how like that's missing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it hits it hits upwards, right, but not like in front of him. While other characters like Leo, they have a lot of like hitbox from the reversals in front of them. You see that shot that's missing, and it's like kind of on them.
Damn, that's actually crazy.
Yeah, so that's why I think it's actually weak. I think the hitbox is very, very weak.
I mean,
And
thank
you can
God for
see it.
players like me that whiffs there, but
Yeah,
Wait,
but like you can
yikes.
just see the problem right there, right?
that man
So,
is running his sword through Zato's torso and nothing is happening.
Yeah, exactly. So I think it's actually one of the weakest. So on defense is actually very bad. I think I think his offensive Dragon Punch is good and neutral Dragon Punch, but I think on defense is actually one of the worst. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't use it, right? Sometimes you still want to kind of like throw it out, even though it's really bad. One of the things that I feel like Ky lacks, honestly, is his defensive options. I think when the game, people start getting more comfortable with it, I think his defensive options are actually very bad. And I think that's his biggest weakness in this game is when he gets put on defense, it's not much he can really do because he don't have really like a lot of like fast buttons to kind of like stop the opponent from like hitting him. Like, and he don't have a lot of moves to like get the opponent off of him unless it hits, right? Or like he don't have a lot of moves that like, okay, like I got like a close slash, I'm plus on block, Like it's not his turn. Like it's his turn, but it's not like you have to respect it all the time, So he still has to kind of like fight, right? And because air dash is super slow in this game now, and like air backdash doesn't really go far, it's really hard to like control create distance, right? It's really hard to create a lot of distance. So you kind of have to really, really fight your way out. And because the damage is so high, when you're wrong really badly. And if you break the wall, you even get more damage. So I think this is actually where his biggest weakness stands at, which is why a lot of people, feel very confident of like fighting Ky because they don't have to worry about him on defense.
That makes sense. Do you
Yeah.
do you have anything in your back pocket that helps you out in a pinch? Like what do you lean on, because you have to play defense, right? So like
I honestly am very confident in my defense, right? Even though the mechanics on defense is actually very hard to do, but I really like to I just wait and kind of recognize what the opponent's trying to do, and if I get a chance to kind of like escape, I use like a lot of like ways of escape, right? I like to do this to kind of like see what they're doing, right? Kind of like counterattack, stuff like that. If they try like mashing, I'll go for like frame traps, or better yet, too. I like to do that and like air dash away, right? And then now they're in the corner. So it depends. So like sometimes I'll go for it like this. I'll go for it like this, right? Uh, or like that, right? Unfortunately, I can't do it off jabs because you can't jump cancel. So you kind of have to like pick and choose like what are you going to try to do, right? So I really like to use a lot of 5K and then try to escape.
so it really boils down to like not so much having defensive options as much as recognizing when your moment is and then knowing what to do from there.
Yes, exactly.
Gotcha. I also like the way you described the DP earlier, because it was really similar to the way you described the stun edge. Like,
Right.
like it's bad, but just do it anyway, so they're at least like worried about it. I like
Yeah,
that
exactly.
mindset of just like presenting the threat, and then like they
Yes.
have to like be concerned with it, even if it's not the best tool in the world.
Exactly. But you also don't want to abuse it because when you abuse it, it shows how bad it is.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, it's one of those things where like oh, I have like the secret power and like the secret power is just like knowing that you're not that strong and you're just smarter than the opponent.
Don't let them find out that Michael's secret stuff is just water.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't let them know.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's the secret water from Space Jam, Play along.
That's hilarious. All right, so
Yeah.
it's a patient defensive game, and then making the most of the opportunities you get. Cool.
Exactly.
All right, next question is the last question. Before we do that, is there anything about Ky that we haven't talked about yet that you think is important for players to know?
I think the important thing about Ky, in my opinion, is like his neutral and buttons. His buttons are just very good. Uh, it's very good, but obviously, normals in this game, particularly in Strive, they reduced the range of like a lot of people's normals. So he used to have a lot more range in this game, in the older games than now. But the idea still applies, right? It's just a bit more differently, and you just have to kind of like be comfortable of like knowing how to like throw like strike normals and stuff like that, right? Because you see how like I did this and then like whiff punish, and stuff like that. So I'll give you an example right here. We go like that, stuff like that. So it's just kind of like knowing how to like throw your normals and what you're looking for, where you're at on the screen. It's very important. And sometimes like giving a little information to your opponent is like important. So like for example, I give like okay, so you do this, or like I give you an example right here, right? Where is this? Here we go. So I'll do something like this. So like doing that is pretty good. You know why? Because you put them near the corner, and you're safe, and you have a lot of position to cover, right? You can do this, you can do that, you can do this. So much you can do from right here, right? You can also just do this, right? And you're kind of still in the same range. Uh, and that's kind of like how the direction that I kind of go with this character, and obviously it's harder to do this. It's very harder to do this, in my opinion. But I feel like long term, it's a very strong skill to have, and it makes you stand out playing any character in this game. So just utilizing your normals, right? Utilizing what you're looking for, you know, how you want to, where you want to set your opponent at, right? You want to keep the pressure, you kind of, you know, throw stuff out in like that, stuff like that.
Okay. I think this character's just gonna get better over time, too.
I think so too.
Like this game plan, like yeah, little big brain at times, playing in the mid range, you know, setting up the options the right way, but it's only gonna get stronger as things move.
Right, exactly. And you know, it takes time. Obviously, I personally feel like the game is still like in its development state in a certain degree, to a certain extent. And with the changes alone, kind of like showed me that, you know, there was a lot of things that they just didn't understand, and now they're kind of getting it now, and they're slowly putting the things that everyone wants in the game. So that's also good. However, you know, it takes time for characters like this to be complete. You know.
Yeah. Kizzie Kay, if someone came to you tomorrow and said, dude, I'm on the fence about playing Ky and Strive, what would you say to them to push them over the fence? Why should someone play this character?
I think this character not only is a very, very cool character, in my opinion, but I also feel like this character can also teach you a lot about just, you know, the ground game in general, ground game, aerial game, and stuff like that. I feel like there's a lot of concepts that you can learn about fighting games. I feel like he's a very perfect character that you can learn about fighting games. What you can do to improve. How can you utilize basic tools and maximize it, right? How do you utilize basic tools and like maximize it for every situation? How can you make one button like this do so much, right? It's a lot of things that you can kind of like do with this character. And I feel like because you can't really crutch on a lot of moves in this with this character, like you could crutch on this move, right? But if somebody blocks it, you have no meter, you're done, right? But he don't really have a lot of moves that he can really like crutch on, right? Outside of like general system mechanics like throw, like, but I feel like everybody can like crutch on throw, right? So I feel like if you play people that take away you trying to throw all the time, you're gonna have to play with your other tools. Like you have to maximize your other tools. You have to not only use your buttons, you have to use specials properly. You have to use your spacing properly and stuff like that. Because a lot of things you're doing is punishable, but there's a way to make it unpunishable, and that's space yourself properly, right? So it all depends. So I feel like if you really want to learn and improve yourself as a player, I think he's a perfect character to play with. And if you just want to play the character because he's just mad cool, I also think he's a cool ass character. You know, so um, I think that's also just very, very important to keep in mind when you play this character. And I think the best part about this character is super. You know, super, super cool. I think when the super actually wall breaks is actually one of the coolest in the game. He has dragon install. You know, he has like a projectile super. He has a lot of like cool supers, right? And if you like electricity or thunder, cool character.
Dude, it just clicked in my head that we literally never talked about Dragon install. Just circle back real quick. Is that part of your game plan at all? Are you using that now that it got buffed?
Yeah, so I'm actually trying my best to utilize Dragon Install in this game. The biggest issue for me, that I actually think Dragon Install is actually very, very strong. The problem is with this game right now is because damage is so high, it's very hard to always be at the right situation to use it. And that's the problem, not with the character, but that's more of like the game's problem, right? Is you make a situation that you need 30% less, but you go like people bread and butters do 30%.
Right. So like getting into the situation where you can use it is getting into a situation where you're one touch.
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. Okay. All right, man. Well, that's all I've got for you. So, yeah, Ky. Big things for this character in the future, I think.
Super cool character, I think.